This is my true story. I thought growing old meant being cared for by the people you raised. I believed my daughter would protect me, respect me, and keep me safe. But instead, she treated me like a burden. One morning, she told me she was going on vacation. But what she did before leaving still haunts me. She locked my bedroom door from the outside and left me inside like a prisoner. I didn't understand why until I found what she was hiding behind the wall. What I discovered changed everything. Before I tell you, comment where you're watching from, and please subscribe so my story can reach more people. She said it was for safety. That's what she told me before she left. My daughter stood there in the doorway with her suitcase packed, her sunglasses already on, and her tone sharp like she was talking to a child. "Don't touch anything, Dad. Don't go in the kitchen, don't move the mail, and don't answer the door. I'll be gone 1 week." I nodded quietly. I didn't want to argue. She turned the key in my bedroom lock and said it was just to keep things secure. Then she left. The sound of the door locking from the outside didn't feel like safety. It felt like punishment. I waited for her car to pull out of the driveway, listening to the fading hum of the engine until it disappeared. The house went quiet. Too quiet. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the locked door. I'm not as young as I used to be, but I'm not helpless. My hands may shake sometimes, but my mind is still sharp. I knew something about that lock wasn't right. Who locks their father's door from the outside? Even if it was for safety, it didn't make sense. I tried turning the handle. It didn't move. Solid. She'd actually done it. I walked around the room slowly, looking at everything like it was new. The curtains were drawn halfway, the air smelled of disinfectant, and my nightstand had been moved slightly from its usual place. I noticed it because I've lived in that same room for years, and old men notice the small things. She'd been in here recently. Cleaning, she said. But I knew better. It wasn't cleaning. It was checking. Checking what? I didn't know yet. I went to the window next. It looked out over the backyard, the one I built for her when she was a kid. The same swing set still stood there, rusted and squeaky. I tried opening the window, but it was nailed shut. I pressed harder. The wood didn't budge. My stomach sank. That wasn't safety either. That was control. I turned and looked around the room again, realizing every possible exit was sealed. The door locked, the window nailed, and the phone charger missing. She didn't want me leaving, and she didn't want me calling anyone either. For a few minutes I sat still, trying to tell myself she meant well. Maybe she was scared I'd fall, or forget to turn something off. Maybe this was just her way of making sure I didn't hurt myself. But the longer I looked around, the less that lie worked. There was no food on the nightstand, no new batteries in the flashlight, no extra blankets. Nothing that said care. Everything said restriction. It didn't feel like she was protecting me. It felt like she was hiding me. Or hiding something from me. I looked toward the closet. That's when I remembered something. Years ago, before my wife passed, this room used to be our shared space. My wife always said, "If anything ever happens, keep this room locked tight. It's where everything that matters is." I never really knew what she meant by that. Over time, I forgot. But now, standing there alone with a locked door behind me, I started to wonder if my daughter knew exactly what that meant. Maybe that's why she'd been so eager to clean this room before leaving. I sat back on the bed, replaying everything in my mind. Her sudden decision to go on vacation, the way she avoided eye contact when locking the door, the strange tone in her voice. My gut told me there was something wrong. She wasn't just keeping me inside. She was keeping something else hidden inside this room. The afternoon light started to fade, and the house grew darker. I could hear the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. I stared at that locked door for hours, thinking about every choice that led to this moment. She had become everything I never imagined my daughter would be. Secretive, cold, controlling. But I wasn't going to sit here quietly and accept it. I may be old, but I've built homes, fixed engines, and survived harder times than this. And as I sat there in that dim room, staring at the lock she thought would keep me still, I made myself a promise. Before she came back, I'd find out exactly what she was hiding. The first day felt like a bad dream I couldn't wake up from. The sound of her car had faded hours ago, and the house was silent except for the refrigerator hum. I tried to open the bedroom door again, hoping maybe she hadn't locked it tightly, but the handle wouldn't move at all. I knocked once, twice, just to test it. Nothing. I was locked in my own room like some kind of stranger in my own house. She left a note on the dresser that said, "There's food in the fridge. Don't leave the room unless it's important." I laughed bitterly at that. How was I supposed to leave the room when she took the key with her? I opened the mini fridge she'd placed inside a week earlier. Inside were a few containers of leftovers, cold pasta, half a chicken breast, some fruit, and 2 bottles of water. Enough for a few days, maybe. The first night, I ate quietly and tried to convince myself she'd come to her senses. She'd call, apologize, say it was just a misunderstanding. But no call came. By the second day, the silence started to feel heavy. I walked circles in that room just to stay sane. The window gave a small view of the street, but the glass was too dusty to see much. I tried wiping it with a towel, but the nails around the frame caught my sleeve and scratched my hand. That's when I realized every window in this house, not just mine, had been sealed. She must have done it recently. There was no reason for it except one. She didn't want me leaving, or maybe she didn't want anyone seeing me. I checked the drawers next. Most were empty. No phone charger, no spare keys, not even my wallet. She'd taken everything I could use to contact someone. The old landline that used to sit on the nightstand was gone too. All that remained were a few clothes, a Bible, and my slippers. Everything else she'd cleared out. She must have done it before leaving, probably when she said she was cleaning my room. By the third day, the power went out. The air conditioner stopped and the light went dark. I thought maybe it was a neighborhood outage, but then I realized the hallway light was still glowing faintly under the door. Only my room had gone dark. That meant the circuit was shut off, manually. My daughter didn't just lock me in here. She cut power to my room. I sat on the bed, staring into the shadows, feeling smaller than I'd ever felt in my life. The nights were the hardest. I could hear faint creaks in the floorboards and sometimes the ticking of the pipes, but otherwise, nothing. The silence made my thoughts louder. I kept thinking about my late wife, how she used to say, "Trust, once cracked, never sounds the same." I wondered what she'd say now if she saw how her daughter was treating me. By the fourth day, I was tired of being scared. I started looking closer at the room, searching every corner. I checked behind the dresser, under the bed, even inside the closet walls. I ran my hand along the paint near the ceiling, smooth everywhere except one spot near the corner where it felt slightly uneven. I tapped it. It made a hollow sound. My heart started racing. I moved the small table out of the way and tapped again. The sound was clear. Something was inside that wall. I didn't have tools, but I had patience. I waited until morning, when light came through the curtains, then began prying gently at the edges with a spoon handle. The wood felt weak, almost like someone had removed and replaced it before. I kept going, bit by bit. My hands were shaking, but I couldn't stop. I didn't know what I was going to find, maybe just old wiring or insulation. But something deep down told me there was more. When I finally loosened part of the panel, a small puff of dust came out. I coughed and wiped my face. Behind the opening, I saw something dark, like a small box wrapped in tape, pushed far back into the cavity. My fingers brushed against it, and I froze. It wasn't old wiring. It wasn't insulation. It was hidden. For the first time that week, I wasn't afraid anymore. I was angry. Angry that she thought she could treat me like a child and hide things under my nose. Angry that she thought I'd never find out. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept looking at that wall, at the loose panel, at the secret I was about to uncover. I knew the next morning I'd pull it out. Whatever it was, it would finally tell me what she was hiding, and why she really locked me in. It happened on the third day, just after noon. The sun outside was bright, but my room was dim and heavy, trapped behind those nailed windows. I'd been sitting in silence for hours when suddenly the ceiling fan stopped spinning. The small lamp near my bed flickered twice and went dark. The fridge gave a low hum, then clicked off. I waited, thinking maybe it was just a power cut. But when the light under the door stayed glowing, I knew it wasn't the house. It was just my room. The power to my side had been cut off completely. At first, I didn't panic. I had lived through power cuts before. But after an hour, the air turned still and hot. I got up slowly, trying to find my flashlight, but it wasn't where it used to be. She had taken that too. My throat was dry, and the last bottle of water was already half empty. I decided to move the nightstand to check if maybe there were batteries behind it. Sometimes I left spare ones there years ago. When I tried to shift the table, one of its legs caught the edge of the carpet and tilted. A corner of it slammed into the wall with a dull thud. That's when I heard a faint click. I thought maybe it was wood settling. But when I leaned closer, I saw a thin crack running vertically along the wallpaper. I pressed my hand against it. The wall felt loose, not solid like it should. I pushed again, harder this time. It moved. Not much, but enough to know it wasn't attached properly. My heart began to race. I'd lived in this house for decades. I built half of it myself. I knew which walls were real and which were hollow. This one had been changed. Recently. I crouched down, using both hands to feel along the seam. There was dust and the faint smell of glue. Old wood mixed with something chemical, maybe adhesive. The panel wasn't part of the original wall. Someone had added it. I remembered how she'd insisted on redecorating last spring, repainting my room while I stayed at her friend's house. Back then, I thought she was being thoughtful. Now I wasn't so sure. I pulled at the edge with my fingers, but the wood wouldn't budge. I looked around for something flat to wedge into the crack. The spoon I'd used earlier was still on the table, bent from prying at the window nails. I jammed it into the gap and twisted until the panel gave a sharp pop. Dust fell into my face, and I coughed hard. I pulled again, slower this time, until one corner came free. Behind the wood was darkness, a shallow cavity filled with cobwebs and something rectangular pushed to the back. I reached in carefully, feeling the rough texture of duct tape around the object. It was small, maybe the size of a shoebox, and heavier than I expected. My heart pounded so loud I could hear it echo inside the wall. I pulled the box out and set it on the floor. The top was sealed with layers of electrical tape, tight and deliberate. For a long minute, I just sat there staring at it. My hands were trembling. I didn't know what I was expecting. Maybe old family keepsakes, maybe photos from before my wife passed. But the way it was hidden, sealed and tucked behind that false wall, it didn't feel like memory storage. It felt like evidence. I peeled the first strip of tape off slowly. The adhesive clung stubbornly, making that tearing sound that filled the whole room. Underneath, the cardboard was soft with age but dry. I tore the rest of the tape away until the lid loosened. Then I lifted it open. The smell hit first, musty, old paper mixed with a hint of perfume. Inside were letters, folded neatly in stacks, some with ribbons, all in handwriting I knew instantly. It was my wife's. Her handwriting, the same careful, looping cursive she used on every grocery list and love note she ever wrote. I froze. These were hers. But that didn't make sense. She'd died years ago. The last letter she ever gave me was in 2007, before she went into the hospital. My daughter had helped me go through her things back then, said she'd boxed everything up. But these letters, they were dated years after she passed. 2009, 2011, 2013. Each one sealed and addressed to me. I couldn't breathe for a second. My chest tightened. My daughter had locked me in this room, and inside it, I'd just found the voice of the woman I lost, still speaking to me from beyond her grave. That wasn't an accident. That was a secret someone wanted buried. And for the first time in years, I was about to learn the truth my daughter never wanted me to see. I sat on the cold floor for nearly 10 minutes before I could even move. The box sat in front of me, covered in dust and memories, and I just stared at it. My hands were shaking. The power was still out, so the only light came from the thin slice of daylight sneaking through the curtains. It hit the corner of the box, making the tape glisten faintly. My daughter had hidden this carefully. Not behind a drawer, not under the bed, but inside the wall. That wasn't a casual secret. That was deliberate. That was fear. I ran my finger across the top, tracing the faint indentations of the tape where it had once sealed shut. The handwriting on the envelopes was unmistakable. I didn't need to open one to know who wrote them. It was my wife's. Her M had a little curve at the start. Her S always leaned left. I used to tease her about that when she'd write grocery lists. Seeing it again made my heart twist. I thought I'd never see her words again. I took the top envelope. It was dated June 2011, 4 years after she died. That didn't make sense. I looked at the next one, October 2013. Another one, March 2015. My throat went dry. She couldn't have written these. Unless she didn't die when I thought she did. My mind started running wild. I'd been told she passed quietly in the hospital after complications. My daughter handled most of the paperwork. I was too broken to question anything back then. I'd signed where she told me to sign, trusted her word when she said it was all handled. I opened the first letter slowly. The paper was yellowing, but the ink was clear. It started with, "My dearest, if you're reading this, then I hope you've forgiven me for leaving the way I did." I froze. Forgiven her? For leaving? I kept reading. She wrote about the arguments we had before she got sick, how she wanted to move, how she didn't trust someone in the family, how she felt something wasn't right with the hospital visits. Then one line stood out. "If anything happens to me, please don't let her control the money." It was meant for you, not her. I read that line over and over until it blurred. My wife wasn't talking about some stranger. She was talking about our daughter. I tore open the next letter. It was shorter. She said she had given access to a small savings account in my name, a safety net she'd been growing quietly for years, but that she'd told our daughter about it when she got too weak to speak. She said, "If something happens to me, promise you'll check the records." But I never got that message. I never got any of them. My daughter must have found them all, one by one, and hidden them away before I ever knew they existed. My stomach felt heavy. I opened a third letter. This one was written shakier, the pen marks uneven. She said she was being moved to a different facility, that she didn't feel safe, that she thought someone was trying to sign papers she hadn't approved. I felt my blood run cold. I remembered that week clearly. The hospital called me once to confirm something, then never again. My daughter told me the rest was handled. I believed her. I looked around the room now, my so-called safe space. It didn't feel safe anymore. The nails on the windows, the lock on the door, the missing phone. It all made sense now. She didn't want me to find this. I sat back, clutching the letters, my pulse thudding hard in my chest. The power flickered for a second, like the house was holding its breath. I stared at the wall where the box had been hidden and realized how deep her deception went. She hadn't just taken my independence. She'd taken my wife's voice, my closure, my truth. I looked at the last letter, still unopened. I couldn't bring myself to read it yet. The air felt heavy, thick, almost suffocating. I placed it gently on the bed beside me. Then I looked at the door, locked from the outside as if mocking me. She thought she could bury the truth forever. But the wall had cracked. The secret was out. I didn't know what I was going to do yet, but I knew one thing for sure. When she came back from her vacation, she wasn't coming home to the same father she locked away. Morning came, but I didn't sleep. I sat in that chair all night, staring at the open box on the floor. The power came back sometime before dawn. I only noticed when the fan started turning again, pushing cold air around the room. The sound felt strange, almost too normal after what I had found. I looked down at the box again. Inside were more letters, folded neatly in a bundle tied with a small piece of faded ribbon. Beneath them were papers, real documents, not just notes. I reached in slowly, my hands trembling, and pulled them out. They were bank forms, insurance records, and a single notarized statement. My wife's name was printed across most of them, but what caught my eye were the signatures at the bottom. 2 names written in blue ink. Hers and my daughter's. My heart sank. These weren't just old records. They were legal papers, transfer authorizations, withdrawal requests, and account access forms. I couldn't understand all the financial language, but the pattern was clear. My wife had created a savings account under my name. After she died, my daughter had signed to access it. I rubbed my eyes, trying to make sense of the dates. The transactions began 2 months after my wife's funeral. Then again, a year later. Then again, 3 years later. The withdrawals were steady. A few thousand here, a few thousand there. All of it under her name. All of it from my account. I found a handwritten note attached to one of the folders. It was my wife's handwriting again. "This account is for your father's care. Promise me you'll protect it for him." That was what my daughter had promised, but she hadn't protected it. She'd stolen it. I sat there, the papers spread across the bed, and everything from the past few years started to make sense. The new car, the vacation home, the jewelry. Every time I'd asked how she could afford it, she laughed and said, "I've been saving." I believed her because I wanted to. But now I knew the truth. She had been spending my wife's last gift to me. My hands were shaking so badly I had to set the papers down. I felt old in that moment, older than I ever had before. Not because of my age, but because of how heavy betrayal feels when it comes from your own child. I remembered how, right after the funeral, she told me not to worry about paperwork. She said she'd handle it all, that I should just focus on grieving. I trusted her like any father would trust his daughter. I signed what she told me to sign. I never asked questions. But the truth was sitting right here in front of me. She'd handled it all right. She'd handled it so well that I didn't even know I was the one being robbed. I picked up one of the withdrawal slips and looked at the signature again. The handwriting was hers, but she'd tried to disguise it. Shorter loops, straighter strokes. It didn't matter. I knew my daughter's writing as well as I knew my own. I turned to the last few pages in the pile. There was a will, an older version. My wife had written a simple message at the bottom. "If anything happens to me, everything goes to my husband. He will know what to do." But this wasn't the version I remembered seeing. The one my daughter showed me after the funeral said everything went to her. That one had been typed, not handwritten. For a long time, I just sat there with my hands over my face. I didn't cry, not really. It was more like a hollow ache spreading through my chest. I thought of how many times she'd hugged me and said, "I'll take care of you, Dad." Now I understood what she really meant. She was taking care of my money, not me. I looked back at the wall where I'd found the box. It wasn't just a hiding place. It was a vault for her lies, a vault she thought would never be opened. But she forgot one thing about me. I built this house myself. I know every nail, every panel, every screw. She might have locked me in, but she could never hide the truth forever. The papers were proof. Proof that my wife had trusted her, and she'd betrayed that trust. Proof that everything she'd taken was mine to reclaim. I placed them all neatly back into the box and sealed it again. The moment I did, I felt something shift inside me. Not anger anymore, just clarity. The next step was obvious. I wasn't going to shout or argue when she came back. I was going to end this quietly, the same way she'd betrayed me, calm, patient, and final. When the sun rose higher, the room filled with pale light, and I picked up the first stack of letters again. The papers were fragile but neatly folded, written in my wife's familiar hand. For a long while, I couldn't bring myself to open them. But something inside told me I had to. These weren't just messages from the past. They were pieces of the truth my daughter had tried to bury. The first letter began simple, with her usual gentle handwriting. "My love, if you are reading this, I'm already gone." I could almost hear her voice. She talked about the pain she felt, knowing I'd struggle alone. She said she'd arranged everything to make sure I'd be comfortable. The savings account, the insurance, the small land parcel near the lake. She wanted me to have peace after her passing. Then the next line made my stomach twist. "Our daughter helped with the paperwork. She promised me she would give you everything." That one sentence said everything. My wife had trusted our daughter to carry out her final wishes. and my daughter had betrayed them both. The next letter was dated a few weeks later. It was shorter, written in a rush. If something feels wrong after I'm gone, check the documents. Don't trust anyone blindly. I paused there. She had known something wasn't right. I kept reading. She described how some forms felt different, how she noticed extra pages appearing when she reviewed the hospital's insurance files. She mentioned the same lawyer I eventually called years later, but she wrote that my daughter had told her not to involve him again because he was too expensive. I turned to the next one. This one was longer, almost 4 pages. It detailed things I had never heard before. My wife explained that her health had been failing faster than the doctors expected, but she believed someone had rushed certain treatments. She never accused anyone directly, but she wrote about her confusion, the medication mix-ups, and her fear that someone was making choices she hadn't approved. It made my skin crawl reading those words. Halfway down the page, one sentence stood out. Promise me, if you ever feel trapped, remember, the truth is inside the house. I looked up from the letter, around my room, at the panel I'd just ripped open. She'd hidden the letters herself. Somehow, before she died, she must have realized our daughter couldn't be trusted and left the truth right where I'd one day find it. I imagined her, weak, maybe struggling to breathe, hiding those envelopes in the wall, hoping I'd discover them someday. It broke something inside me just thinking about it. I opened another letter, this one dated close to her final days. The handwriting was shaky. She wants me to sign something again. I told her no. I think she's angry. I don't understand why she keeps asking. I felt my heart pounding. I flipped to the last page. If I don't make it home, tell her I forgive her, but she must not keep what isn't hers. I set the papers down, staring blankly at the wall. Forgive her. That was just like my wife. Gentle, patient, too kind for her own good. But I couldn't forgive this. Not yet. I spent the next hour reading through every single letter. Each one connected another piece of the puzzle. The money, the property, the deception. My wife had tried to warn me from beyond her grave. The letters weren't just emotional goodbyes, they were instructions. She'd trusted our daughter, but she'd also prepared for the day I might uncover the truth. When I finished the last one, I sat there with a pile of paper that felt heavier than any weight I'd ever carried. All those years I thought my wife had simply passed away peacefully. All those years I'd looked at my daughter with pride, thinking she'd taken care of everything. I never knew she was the reason I had lost everything. The letters gave me something my wife could never say in person, that her death wasn't the end of her love or her protection. She'd made sure the truth would survive, no matter how long it took to find. I gathered them carefully, placed them back into their envelopes, and sealed the box again. My daughter thought she had locked me away to keep me quiet, but what she really did was lock me inside the very room where her lies were hidden. Now I had proof, not just of theft, but of betrayal that ran deeper than money. It wasn't just about lost savings. It was about the destruction of trust between a father and his only child. The house was silent, but my mind wasn't. I knew the next step had to be taken, quietly, legally, and completely. I wasn't going to scream or beg. I was going to end it the same way she started it, with paperwork and a signature. It took me the rest of the day to process what I'd just read. The letters, the documents, the lies. They weren't just pieces of paper anymore. They were proof that everything I thought I knew about my daughter, about the life we shared, was built on manipulation. I sat there replaying the last few years in my head, every argument, every accidental change in my finances, every time she dismissed my questions with a smile. All of it had a reason now. She hadn't been protecting me. She'd been protecting what she stole. By afternoon, I walked through the house like a stranger in my own home. Every corner, every piece of furniture looked different now, tainted. I looked at the photographs on the wall, the ones she insisted we hang up after my wife's death. In every picture, my daughter was smiling, her hand on my shoulder. But now I saw it differently. Those weren't photos of love. They were trophies, reminders of control. I stood in the living room staring at the family portrait we took 10 years ago. My wife was gone by then, but my daughter had insisted we keep taking photos for memories. The longer I stared, the more hollow that word sounded. Memories. What memories? Lies, deception, and silence. I went back to the bedroom and laid out the letters again. I wanted to make sure I wasn't losing my mind. Every word was real. Every date matched. The bank records, the lawyer's notes, my wife's handwriting. They all told the same story. My daughter had drained her mother's account, changed legal documents, and locked me away to keep me from ever discovering it. Suddenly, all her strange behavior made sense. The renovation she said she was doing last year. That's when she must have sealed the wall. The new locks she put on the windows. Those weren't for safety. Those were for containment. Even her kindness had a purpose. The home-cooked meals, the gifts on holidays, the fake tears when I mentioned my wife. It was all a performance. For years, she had built a version of reality where I was helpless, where she was the caretaker, and where no one questioned her authority. I thought she was being protective. In truth, she was keeping me weak, dependent, and quiet. She controlled my medication schedule, my bank cards, even my doctor visits. Everything I needed passed through her hands. I sat down again, trying to remember the last time she actually looked at me like her father. Not like a responsibility, not like a problem to manage. I couldn't remember. That realization hurt more than anything else. The betrayal wasn't just about money. It was about love, a love that had turned into ownership. As I stared at the papers, I felt something shift inside me. I wasn't angry the way I expected. It wasn't loud rage, it was something colder. A kind of calm that only comes when you've accepted there's no going back. She had stolen years of peace from me, but she hadn't broken me. Not yet. The next thing I did was simple. I picked up the landline and called the lawyer my wife had mentioned. I hadn't spoken to him in almost 15 years, but when I said my name, he remembered right away. He agreed to meet that week. I told him everything, the letters, the documents, the hidden box. He listened quietly and then said something that stayed with me. "Mr. Collins, you've been robbed, but not just of money." He was right. I'd been robbed of dignity, trust, and freedom, all under my own roof. After the call, I packed a small bag, clothes, medicine, and the box. I didn't plan to run away. I planned to leave with purpose. I locked my room from the inside and sat by the window until the sun went down. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like the prisoner anymore. She did. Because now I held the key, not to the door, but to the truth. And the truth is stronger than any lock she could ever use. The day after I found the letters, I woke up early. My hands were stiff from age and from holding those papers too tightly the night before. I sat at the edge of the bed, listening to the hum of the refrigerator downstairs, thinking about every choice I'd made as a father. I wasn't proud of all of them, but I never thought one of them would lead me here, locked in a house by my own blood. The phone sat on the nightstand beside me, the old landline she thought I'd forgotten how to use. I picked it up, dialed the lawyer's number again, and waited. When he answered, his voice was calm, steady, like someone used to handling chaos quietly. I told him I found something hidden in my room, letters from my late wife and financial documents showing missing funds. I could hear him breathing on the other end, the kind of silence that means someone's taking notes. I read him the account number listed on one of the letters. He asked me to wait a moment. I could hear the soft click of a keyboard. Then he came back and said, "Yes, Mr. Collins. The account exists. It's still open under your name." My chest tightened. I asked if anyone had accessed it recently. He hesitated before answering. "There was a withdrawal about 2 years ago. A large one. And the signature on it wasn't yours." I didn't need him to say the rest. I already knew whose it was, my daughter's. He said we'd need to meet in person to go over everything properly, so I agreed to come to his office that afternoon. But there was one problem. She'd taken my car keys. I searched the drawers, the counter, even the laundry basket. Nothing. She must have taken them with her on vacation to make sure I couldn't go anywhere. That's how certain she was that I'd never find out. I went to the hallway, where the emergency phone charger hung by the wall. It barely worked, but after a few tries, I got my phone to turn on. The battery icon flashed red. I opened my banking app and scrolled through the account history. There it was, an entry from years ago labeled Joint Management Transfer. I clicked it, and the signature appeared on screen. Her name, in her handwriting, but disguised under a slightly different spelling. She had made herself a joint holder without telling me. It felt like someone had punched the air out of me. For 40 years, I had been careful with every penny, every bill, every tax. And she had taken it in one move, hidden behind her smile and her, "Don't worry, Dad, I'll handle it." The next part was the hardest. I called the local bank branch and asked to speak with the manager. When I explained who I was, she immediately pulled up my record and confirmed what the lawyer said. She even faxed over a copy of the withdrawal slip. There, clear as day, was my daughter's name next to my wife's old account number. The signature line carried the same blue ink stroke that matched the documents I'd found in the wall. I thanked her and hung up. Then I called the lawyer again. I told him I had proof, and he said, "Bring everything. Don't leave a single paper behind." By then, it was afternoon. The house was quiet, but it didn't feel peaceful. Every sound, the creak of the floor, the ticking clock, the wind outside, reminded me how alone I'd been while she built her lie. I sat there, staring at the wall she'd sealed, thinking how easy it had been for her to trick me all these years. When I finally stood up, I packed the letters, the withdrawal slips, and the will into an old envelope. Then I took my late wife's framed photo from the shelf, placed it inside the bag, and whispered quietly, "We're going to fix this." The next morning, I called a neighbor for a ride. He didn't ask questions, just saw my face and nodded. When we reached the lawyer's office, I handed him everything. He went through each paper slowly, one by one, his brow furrowing as he flipped through the letters. When he finished, he said, "This isn't just theft. This is fraud and elder abuse." Those words hit hard. Elder abuse. I never thought I'd be the kind of man to be pitied like that. But this wasn't about pity. It was about justice. As I left his office that day, the lawyer assured me he'd start proceedings immediately. He said my daughter would get a legal notice within the week. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I could breathe again. She thought she could bury the truth behind a locked door, but I had just opened every door she never wanted me to touch. It was exactly 7 days later when I heard the sound of tires crunching on the driveway. I was sitting in the living room with the lawyer's letter on the table, already opened and ready for her. Through the window, I saw her bright red car pull in, music blaring, sunglasses on, face relaxed, the look of someone who thought her world was still safe. She got out laughing on the phone, dragging her suitcase behind her like nothing had changed. She had no idea that by the time she walked back through that door, the life she'd built on lies was about to collapse. The door opened. "Dad, I'm home!" she called out, the same cheerful tone she always used when she wanted to sound innocent. I didn't move. I just watched her walk past the hallway mirror and freeze when she noticed the opened envelope on the table. She looked at me, smiled awkwardly, and said she'd unpack later. I could see the nervous twitch in her hands, the kind that shows when someone's bluffing. I waited until she sat down before I said a word. I told her the lawyer had called me. Her face went pale instantly. She tried to speak, but no sound came out. I handed her the copy of the withdrawal slip with her signature on it. She stared at it for a full minute before whispering, "Dad, please. It's not what you think." But it was exactly what I thought. She had drained her mother's account, stolen what wasn't hers, and then locked me away so I'd never discover it. When she realized I wasn't shouting, she changed her approach. She put on that soft, pitying expression she always used when she wanted control. "You don't understand," she said. "I did it for you. I just managed things better." I shook my head slowly. The words didn't matter anymore. The papers on the table spoke louder than anything she could say. She reached for my hand, but I pulled it away. Her face twisted into something colder. No more tears, no more excuses. That's when she saw the official letter from the court beside the documents. Her eyes widened as she read the heading. Notice of investigation. Financial misconduct. and elder abuse. She stood up so quickly her chair fell backward. "You can't do this," she said. I told her I already had. The lawyer had filed the case, frozen the remaining assets, and begun the process of transferring ownership of the house back to my name alone. Everything she'd taken was under review. Every penny, every fake signature, every hidden lie. For a long time she just stood there staring at me. Then she started crying. Real tears this time, not the practiced ones. She said she never meant to hurt me, that she only wanted control because she was scared of losing me. But she'd already lost me long before that. The moment she locked that door and left me alone, she chose greed over family. When the crying stopped, she went quiet. She packed a few things into her bag without saying another word. Before leaving, she turned around and asked if I'd ever forgive her. I told her forgiveness wasn't mine to give anymore. It belonged to the woman whose money she stole and whose memory she buried. The door closed behind her softly. No slamming, no shouting. Just silence. I sat there listening to the sound of her car engine fading down the road, realizing it was the same sound I'd heard when she left for that so-called vacation. But this time, it didn't hurt. Later that evening, the lawyer called to confirm the investigation had been accepted. He said the authorities would contact her within a few days. I thanked him, hung up, and sat alone in the same house she'd tried to claim as hers. The walls no longer felt like a prison. They felt like protection, mine again, as they should have been all along. Before going to bed, I went back to the room she locked me in and placed my wife's letters on the nightstand. I whispered quietly, "You were right." The truth was inside this house. That night, for the first time in years, I slept without fear. When the house finally went silent that night, I sat alone in the kitchen with the lights dimmed. The table was clean, except for one thing: my wife's letters, neatly stacked beside the cup of tea I'd forgotten to finish. I looked at the walls around me and thought about how many years I'd lived in this house believing it was built on love. But love without honesty isn't love. It's a trap. My daughter thought the locks, the lies, and the control would keep her secret buried. But she forgot something important. Truth doesn't age. It waits. I thought about every small moment that led here. The mornings she made me breakfast and asked about my health. The afternoons she helped me manage my bills. The nights she locked my door before going to sleep. Each one of those acts had felt normal at the time, but now I knew they weren't kindness. They were cover. She wasn't caring for me. She was covering her theft with the mask of duty. It's strange how betrayal doesn't hit all at once. It seeps in slowly. Even as I held the proof in my hands, a part of me still wanted to protect her. Still wanted to believe there was some misunderstanding, some excuse that could undo what she'd done. That's what being a parent does. It makes forgiveness instinctive, even when it's undeserved. But then I looked at my wife's handwriting again, and that feeling disappeared. My wife trusted her daughter to honor her memory. Instead, she robbed both of us. I got up and walked down the hallway toward the room she had locked me in. The smell of dust and old wood filled the air. The loose panel on the wall was still open, the empty space behind it like a wound that would never quite heal. I ran my hand over the edge of it and thought about how many years she must have hidden those letters there. How many times she probably stood in that same spot, confident that I'd never know. She underestimated me. Not my strength, but my patience. I turned around and looked at the rest of the room. It didn't feel like a prison anymore. It felt like a reminder. I realized that the true punishment wasn't the lawsuit, the frozen accounts, or the investigation. It was the silence that would follow her. The silence of being cut off from the very person she thought she'd fooled forever. People talk about revenge like it's loud, like it's anger, shouting, and destruction. But the real kind is quiet. It's a signature on a legal form. It's the closing of a door. It's the calm way you take back what was stolen and walk away. That's what I did. No yelling, no fighting, no dramatic scenes. Just truth, paper, and the law. The next morning, I called the lawyer one last time. I told him to finalize everything and make sure my daughter couldn't access anything under my name again. He said he'd handle it personally. Then he paused and said, You did the right thing. I didn't answer. There's no right thing when family is involved, only the thing that hurts less. That afternoon, I took a slow walk through the backyard. The grass was uneven, the fence needed fixing, and the garden she used to water had turned dry. But for the first time, I noticed something beautiful. Peace. The kind that doesn't depend on anyone else. I realized that all these years I'd been waiting for someone to take care of me when all I needed was the courage to take care of myself again. Before sunset, I sat by the window with one of my wife's letters. The last one she ever wrote said, "If you ever feel lost, remember, the truth will find you even if you stop looking." I smiled for the first time in weeks. She was right. The truth had found me, even when my own family tried to bury it. Now, when I lock my door at night, it's from the inside, by choice. Not out of fear, but out of peace. Because this time, I hold the key. She locked me in to hide her lies, but I unlocked everything she feared and walked out with my dignity.